Dr. Jake Harrison pressed his face against the viewing port of the research vessel Meridian's Edge and watched the planet Cathara spin below. After 3 years of searching through dead space and empty worlds, they had finally found them. The Vorthak were real. "Still hard to believe we're here," said Lyra Voss, the communications officer. She moved up beside Jake, her tablet showing readings from the surface scanners. "Every species in the galaxy has tried to find these things. Most thought they were just stories." Jake nodded but kept watching the planet. Down there somewhere lived the most dangerous predators anyone had ever heard of. The Vorthak. Creatures, so fierce that entire civilizations told scary stories about them, so smart that no one had ever caught one, so deadly that even the Hegemony Coalition's war fleets avoided their territory. "Captain Zeftai wants to see you on the bridge," Lyra said. "The morning briefing is starting." Jake followed her through the ship's narrow hallways. The Meridian's Edge was a research vessel, not a warship, but it still felt too small when you were heading toward something that could probably tear through the hull with its claws. The bridge buzzed with activity. Captain Zeftai stood at the main display, his forearms moving across different control panels at once. The Zentorian captain was methodical and careful, which made him perfect for dangerous research missions. Chief Security Officer Crix stood nearby, his massive frame blocking part of the view screen. The Hegemony warrior never looked happy, but today he seemed extra grumpy. "Ah, Dr. Harrison," Captain Zeftai said without turning around. "Perfect timing. We have located what appears to be Vorthak activity on the northern continent." The main screen showed a forest of massive trees. Jake could see movement between the trunks, but the shapes were too blurry to make out details. "How can you be sure it's them?" Jake asked. "Energy signatures," Crix grunted. "Big ones, and the local wildlife ran away. Everything on this continent is scared of something." "The probe data is interesting," Lyra added, checking her tablet. "Whatever's down there, it's giving off psychic readings unlike anything in our databases." Jake felt his heart speed up. This was it. After years of studying alien life forms, he was about to meet the legendary Vorthak. Every xenobiologist in the galaxy would kill for this chance. "What's the plan?" he asked. Captain Zeftai finally turned around. His large dark eyes reflected the bridge lights. "Standard protocol. We maintain safe distance and deploy automated probes for initial observation. No direct contact until we understand their behavior patterns." "Absolutely not," Crix said, his voice like grinding metal. "These things are killers. We should observe from orbit and leave. Getting close is asking to die." "We didn't come all this way to take pictures from space," Jake said. "The whole point is to study them up close. The whole point is to study them and live to tell about it." Crix shot back. Before the argument could continue, an alarm started beeping. Lyra looked at her readings and frowned. "Captain, the movement patterns down there just changed. Whatever was in the forest is heading our way." "How fast?" Captain Zeftai asked. "Fast. They'll reach the clearing where we plan to land in about 10 minutes. Jake moved to the sensor station and pulled up the readings. The heat signatures were huge, much bigger than he had expected, and there were several of them moving together. "Pack hunters," he said, "just like the stories described." "This is exactly why we should leave," Crix said. "They know we're here, and they're coming for us." "Or they're curious," Jake suggested. "Maybe they want to see what we are." "Curiosity from apex predators usually ends with something getting eaten," Crix replied. Captain Zeftai studied the readings for a moment. "We proceed with the landing, but stay ready for immediate departure. Dr. Harrison, you'll observe from the shuttle. If anything goes wrong, we leave immediately." 20 minutes later, Jake sat in the shuttle with Pilot Commander Roy Banks. Through the front window, he could see the edge of the alien forest. The trees were enormous, each one big enough to hide a building. Somewhere in those shadows, the Vorthak were waiting. "You sure about this, Doc?" Roy asked. He was one of the few other humans on the crew, and Jake was glad to have him along. "These things have a reputation for a reason. Every species that's ever encountered them has tried to capture or kill them," Jake said. "Maybe they're just defending themselves." Or maybe they really are unstoppable killing machines. The shuttle's sensors picked up movement. Something big stepped out from between the trees. Jake got his first look at a living Vorthak and immediately understood why every species in the galaxy feared them. The creature was massive, easily twice the size of a hegemony warbeast. Its body looked like a cross between a big cat and a dragon, covered in scales that shifted color as it moved. Intelligence gleamed in its large golden eyes. This was no simple animal. This was a thinking, reasoning predator that could probably outsmart most of the galaxy's civilized species. But something was wrong. The Vorthak wasn't acting aggressive. It moved slowly, carefully, like it was trying not to scare them. Behind it, Jake could see two more adults emerging from the forest. "Command, are you seeing this?" Roy spoke into his communicator. "We see it," came Captain Zeftai's voice. "Maintain position and do not exit the shuttle." That's when Jake saw them. Three small shapes moving between the adults' legs. His breath caught in his throat. "Are those babies?" he asked. The shuttle's cameras zoomed in automatically. Sure enough, three tiny Vorthak cubs stumbled around their parents' feet. They looked like oversized kittens with scales, all big eyes and clumsy movements. "In 20 years of military service, I've never seen anything like this," Roy said quietly. The largest adult, probably the mother, stepped forward. She lowered her massive head and looked directly at the shuttle. For a moment, Jake felt like she was looking right into his soul. Then she did something that made his heart skip a beat. She picked up one of the cubs in her mouth, gently, the way a cat carries a kitten. She walked to within 10 feet of the shuttle and placed the cub on the ground. Then she stepped back and sat down, watching. "What is she doing?" Roy whispered. Jake stared at the scene in front of him. The cub sat alone between its mother and the shuttle, looking confused but not afraid. The other adults had positioned themselves in a semicircle, all watching the shuttle with the same intense attention. "I think," Jake said slowly, "she's making an introduction." Jake stared at the small Vorthak cub sitting alone on the ground. The little creature looked up at the shuttle with bright golden eyes, making soft chirping sounds. Behind it, the three adult Vorthak waited perfectly still, watching every move. "Command, what are your orders?" Roy asked into his communicator. His voice was tight with tension. Captain Zeftai's response crackled through the speaker. "Do not exit the shuttle. This could be a trap." "It doesn't look like a trap," Jake said. He couldn't take his eyes off the cub. The little thing was trying to stand up but kept falling over on its oversized paws. "Dr. Harrison, you will remain in the shuttle," came Crix's harsh voice over the radio. "These creatures are known killers. This is obviously some kind of hunting strategy." Jake watched as the mother Vorthak nudged the second cub forward with her nose. The little one stumbled toward its sibling and they began playing together in the grass. Their play looked exactly like kittens wrestling, complete with tiny growls and gentle pouncing. "Those don't look like killers to me," Jake said. "The adults do," Roy pointed out. He was right. The three grown Vorthak were huge and clearly powerful. But they sat calmly, making no threatening moves. The mother then did something even more surprising. She picked up the third cub and carried it over to join the other two. Now all three babies sat in the space between their parents and the shuttle. The largest cub, braver than the others, took a few wobbly steps toward the shuttle. "It's coming. Closer," Roy said. "Should I start the engines?" Jake pressed his face against the window. The cub was now only 5 feet away. It sat down and tilted its head, studying the shuttle with obvious curiosity. Then it made a sound that was almost like a purr. "They're not attacking," Jake said. "They're introducing their children." "That makes no sense," came Crix's voice through the radio. "Predators don't show their young to strangers. Unless they want something," Captain Zeftai added. "Dr. Harrison, what is your assessment?" Jake thought about everything he knew about animal behavior. Parent animals only brought their babies near strangers for 2 reasons. Either they were showing them off with pride or they were asking for help. "I think they want us to meet the cubs," he said finally. "Absolutely not," Crix barked. You are not leaving that shuttle. But Jake was already reaching for his environmental suit. I'm going out there. Doc, that's crazy, Roy said. Those things could tear you apart. Look at them, Jake said, pointing through the window. The adult Vorthak sat like giant cats, tails curled around their feet. Their posture was relaxed, not aggressive. If they wanted to hurt us, they would have done it already. Dr. Harrison, I order you to remain in the shuttle, Captain Zeftai's voice commanded. Jake paused with his hand on the suit's helmet. He had never disobeyed orders before. But something about this situation felt different. The Vorthak weren't acting like the stories described. They were acting like parents who wanted to show off their children. I'm sorry, Captain, Jake said, but I think this is important. He put on his helmet and moved to the shuttle's exit hatch. Roy grabbed his arm. Jake, don't do this. We don't know what they want. That's exactly why I need to find out, Jake replied. He looked back at the cubs through the window. The brave one had moved even closer and was now sniffing at the shuttle's landing gear. They're just babies, Roy. Look at them. Jake opened the hatch and stepped outside. The alien air felt different even through his suit's filters. He could smell something like pine trees mixed with something wild and free. The three adult Vorthak turned their massive heads to watch him, but none of them moved from their sitting positions. The cubs, however, reacted immediately. All three of them started making excited chirping sounds and stumbled toward him. The bravest one reached him first and bumped against his legs like a friendly cat. Jake knelt down slowly. The cub looked up at him with those big golden eyes and made a sound that was definitely a purr. Without thinking, Jake reached out and gently touched the top of its head. The scales felt warm and smooth, and the cub leaned into his touch. Command, Jake said into his radio. The cubs are friendly. They're acting like domestic animals. Get back in the shuttle now, Crix's voice commanded. But something amazing was happening. The other two cubs had joined their sibling and were now clustering around Jake's knees. One of them was trying to climb up his leg. They were treating him like a favorite uncle, not a dangerous stranger. Jake looked up at the adult Vorthak. The mother was watching with what looked like approval. She made a low, rumbling sound that might have been communication. The other adults answered with similar sounds. They're talking about something, Jake reported. I think they're discussing me. Suddenly, the mother Vorthak stood up. Jake's heart jumped, but she didn't approach. Instead, she walked a few steps backward, giving him more space. The other adults did the same. Now Jake was alone with the three cubs, and their parents were watching from a distance. One of the cubs climbed into Jake's lap and curled up like a cat. Another one was chewing on his glove. The third one had discovered the equipment pouch on his belt and was trying to figure out how to open it. This is unbelievable, Jake said. They're leaving their babies with me. Dr. Harrison returned to the shuttle immediately. Captain Zeftai ordered. Jake looked back at the shuttle, then at the cubs playing around him. The brave one had fallen asleep in his lap, purring softly. The mother Vorthak lay down about 20 feet away, resting her massive head on her paws but keeping her eyes on Jake and the cubs. I don't think they want me to leave, Jake said. What do you mean? Came Lyra's voice through the radio. I think they want me to babysit. The radio was quiet for a long moment. Then Crix's voice exploded through the speaker. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. Apex predators do not hire babysitters. But as Jake sat there with 3 alien babies crawling all over him, he couldn't think of any other explanation. The adult Vorthak had deliberately brought their cubs to meet him. They had stepped back to give him space with the babies, and now they were watching him like parents who had left their children with a trusted friend. The cub in his lap opened one golden eye and looked up at him. It made a tiny chirping sound and went back to sleep. Jake gently stroked its scales and wondered what he had gotten himself into. Command, he said quietly. I think we need to call for backup. This situation is way beyond standard first contact protocols. What kind of backup? Captain Zeftai asked. Jake looked at the sleeping cub in his arms, then at the 2 others who were now curled up against his legs like puppies. The adult Vorthak continued to watch him with expressions that looked almost hopeful. The kind that knows about raising babies, Jake said. 3 days later, Dr. Amanda Cole stepped off the emergency transport ship and immediately understood why the galaxy was buzzing with excitement. On the grassy clearing in front of her, a human man sat cross-legged while 3 baby Vorthak climbed, all over him like oversized kittens. "That's him?" asked Ben Murphy, the linguist who had traveled with her. "He doesn't look like someone who just made the biggest discovery in galactic history." Amanda watched Jake Harrison gently untangle one of the cubs from his shirt while another one chewed on his boot. The third cub was curled up asleep in his lap, making soft purring sounds. "He looks like a babysitter," said Katie Ross, adjusting her behavioral analysis equipment. "Which is exactly what he is." 20 feet away, 3 enormous adult Vorthak lay in the grass like giant cats sunbathing. They watched Jake and the cubs with calm attention, showing no signs of stress or aggression. It was the most relaxed group of apex predators Amanda had ever seen. "The readings are incredible," Katie continued, checking her scanners. "The adult Vorthak are completely at ease. Their stress hormones are at levels you'd expect from domestic animals, not wild predators." Jake looked up as they approached. He had dark circles under his eyes and his hair was messy, but he was smiling. "Dr. Cole, thank goodness you're here," he said. "These little ones are wearing me out." The cub in his lap opened its golden eyes and looked at the newcomers. It made a questioning chirp sound and looked back up at Jake, who gently stroked its scales. "It's okay, Scout," Jake said softly. "These are friends." "You named them?" Amanda asked. "Scout, Ember, and Titan," Jake said, pointing to each cub. "Scout here is the brave one who approached the shuttle first. Ember is the curious one who gets them into everything. And Titan is the sleepy one who loves to cuddle." As if hearing its name, Ember looked up from where it was investigating Ben's equipment bag. The cub tilted its head and made a series of chirping sounds that almost sounded like it was trying to talk. "Fascinating," Ben said, pulling out his translation device. "Dr. Harrison, have you noticed any patterns in their vocalizations?" "They definitely communicate," Jake said. "Watch this." He made a low humming sound, and all 3 cubs immediately looked at him. Scout climbed out of his lap, and the other 2 gathered around Jake's feet. "That sound means come here," Jake explained. "They taught it to me." Amanda knelt down near Scout, who was now sitting at Jake's side like a well-trained pet. The cub studied her with intelligent eyes, then looked back at Jake as if asking permission. "Go ahead, Scout," Jake said. "She's nice." The cub cautiously approached Amanda and sniffed her hand. After a moment, it allowed her to touch its head. The scales felt warm and surprisingly soft. "This is impossible," Amanda murmured. "Everything we know about Vorthak behavior says they should have killed all of us by now." "Maybe everything we know is wrong," Jake suggested. Katie was studying readings from the adult Vorthak. "Dr. Cole, you need to see this. The psychic emanations from the adults have changed since you arrived. They're stronger and more focused." "Focused how?" "They're scanning us, reading our emotions, our intentions. But it's not aggressive. It's more like they're evaluating us." Ben's translation device suddenly started beeping. He looked at the display and frowned. "That's odd. I'm picking up linguistic patterns from the adults, but they're not directed at us. They're talking to each other." "About what?" Amanda asked. "I can't be sure yet, but some of the patterns match concepts related to trust and testing." Jake looked up sharply. "Testing? Testing what?" Before anyone could answer, the largest adult Vorthak, the mother, stood up and approached their group. Everyone except Jake tensed, but the massive creature moved slowly and calmly. She stopped about 10 feet away and sat down again. "That's Scout's mother," Jake said. "I call her Starweaver because of the way her scales change color in the light." Starweaver made a series of deep rumbling sounds. The cubs immediately perked up and chirped back to her. Then she looked directly at Amanda and made a different sound, one that seemed more questioning. "I think she's asking about you," Jake told Amanda. "She wants to know if you're trustworthy." "How can you tell?" "Watch the cubs." Scout had moved to stand between Amanda and Starweaver. The little cub was looking back and forth between them, clearly nervous. Ember and Titan had moved closer to Jake, seeking comfort. "They're protective of you," Katie observed. "The cubs see you as part of their family now, and their mother wants to make sure your friends won't hurt you," Amanda realized. Jake slowly stood up, being careful not to disturb Titan, who had climbed up to sit on his shoulder. He walked toward Starweaver, and the massive Vorthak lowered, her head to his level. "It's okay," Jake said softly, placing his hand on Starweaver's snout. "They're here to help." Starweaver made a gentle rumbling sound and touched Jake's forehead with her nose. Amanda felt a strange tingling sensation in her mind, like someone walking through her thoughts with soft footsteps. "She's reading you," Katie said, checking her scanners. "All of you. The psychic scan is incredibly detailed." The sensation lasted only a few seconds. Then Starweaver stepped back and made a sound that Ben's translator identified as approval. "I think we passed," Ben said, looking at his device. The other two adult Vorthak approached now, moving with the same careful calm as Starweaver. They positioned themselves around the group, but not threateningly. It was more like they were including Amanda, Ben, and Katie in their family circle. "This is unprecedented," Amanda said. "They're accepting us based on our relationship with Dr. Harrison." "But why?" Ben asked. "What makes him special?" Jake looked down at Scout, who had returned to his side and was now leaning against his leg. "I don't think it's about me being special. I think it's about how I treat the cubs." "Explain," Amanda said. "Every other species that's found the Vorthak has tried to capture them or study them like objects. But when I saw the cubs, I didn't think about research or discovery. I just saw babies who needed protection." Katie nodded, studying her readings. "The cubs' stress levels are minimal when they're with you, but they spike whenever they're separated from you for too long. You've become their primary caregiver." "More than that," Amanda said slowly. "I think you've become their security blanket. They trust you completely, and their parents trust you because of that." Ember had wandered over to Ben's equipment and was trying to figure out how the translation device worked. The little cub pawed at the buttons and made questioning sounds. "Ember, no," Jake said gently. "That's not a toy." But instead of stopping, Ember looked at Jake and made a very deliberate sound. Ben's translator immediately picked it up. "Wait," Ben said, staring at his device. It just said, "Why not?" in perfect Vorthak syntax. Everyone stared at the cub. Ember looked back at them with innocent golden eyes and made the sound again. "They're learning our language," Amanda breathed. "But more than that, they're questioning us. That level of cognitive development is extraordinary. They're a lot smarter than they look," Jake agreed. "Yesterday, Scout figured out how to open my supply pack, and Titan somehow knew I was sad about missing my sister's birthday call. It brought me a flower." "Emotional intelligence," Katie said. "They're reading your feelings and responding appropriately." Starweaver made another rumbling sound, and all three cubs immediately went to her. She touched each one gently with her nose, then looked back at Jake. The message was clear, even without translation. "She's telling them it's time to go back to their parents," Jake said, "but they'll return tomorrow." As if understanding, Scout ran back to Jake and nuzzled his hand one more time before joining its siblings. The Vorthak family walked slowly, back toward the forest, the cubs looking over their shoulders at Jake until they disappeared into the trees. "This changes everything," Amanda said quietly. "The Vorthak aren't just apex predators. They're evaluating us, testing our species to see if we're worthy of their trust. The question is," Ben added, "what happens if we pass their test?" The attack came without warning. Jake was sitting with the cubs in their usual spot when the sky filled with dark shapes. Hegemony warships dropped out of hyperspace and immediately took position around the planet. All humans on the surface. "This is Commander Rex Vaughn of the Hegemony Coalition," a voice boomed from speakers on the ships. "You are interfering with a military operation. Evacuate immediately." Jake pulled the three cubs closer to him as they whimpered in fear. Scout pressed against his chest while Ember and Titan huddled at his sides. The adult Vorthak emerged from the forest, but instead of looking afraid, they looked angry. "Jake, we need to get out of here," Amanda said, running toward him from the research camp. Ben and Katie were right behind her, carrying emergency equipment. "I'm not leaving the Cubs," Jake said firmly. "You have to," Katie said. "Those are hegemony battle cruisers. They're not here to study anything." Starweaver and the other two adults positioned themselves between the Cubs and the ships above. The massive creature's scales began changing color, shifting from calm blues and greens to warning reds and oranges. Commander Vaughn's voice echoed across the clearing again. "The creatures you are harboring are classified as military assets. Surrender them immediately or face the consequences." "Military assets," Ben said in disbelief. "They're babies." "Not to the hegemony," Amanda said grimly. "Katie, what are your readings showing?" Katie checked her scanners and her face went pale. "The adult Vorthax energy signatures just tripled, and there are more of them coming." Jake looked toward the forest and saw shapes moving between the trees. "Lots of shapes. Big ones." "How many more?" he asked. "At least 20, Katie said. "Maybe 30. The Cubs in Jake's arms were making distressed sounds now. They could sense the tension and fear from everyone around them. Jake tried to calm them by humming the soothing sound they had taught him, but it wasn't working. "We need to evacuate now," Amanda said. "This is about to become a war zone." "No," Jake said. "Look at the Cubs. Look at their parents. They're not preparing to run. They're preparing to protect something." "To protect what?" Ben asked. "Us," Jake realized. "They're protecting us." As if to prove his point, Starweaver moved closer to their group. She made a series of rumbling sounds that Ben's translator picked up as commands. The other adult Vorthax spread out in a defensive formation around the humans. "This is impossible," Amanda said. "Wild animals don't protect other species." "The Vorthax aren't wild animals," Jake said, understanding flooding through him. "They never were." Above them, the hegemony ships began powering up their weapons. Energy readings spiked across Katie's scanners. "All civilians have 30 seconds to evacuate," Commander Vaughn announced. "After that, we will consider anyone on the surface to be hostile." Jake looked down at Scout, who was looking back up at him with complete trust in those golden eyes. The little cub wasn't just seeking comfort, it was trying to comfort him, making soft purring sounds and nuzzling his hand. "They're not afraid of the ships," Jake said suddenly. "The Cubs aren't afraid." "What do you mean?" Amanda asked. "Look at them. They're scared of the loud noises, but they're not afraid of the danger. They trust their parents to keep them safe." "Jake, that doesn't matter right now," Katie said urgently. "We need to leave before those ships start shooting." But Jake was studying Starweaver's posture. The massive Vorthax stood calm and ready, but she wasn't crouched for attack. She was standing like someone waiting for the right moment to reveal a secret. "Time's up," Commander Vaughn's voice declared. The first energy blast came from the lead hegemony ship, aimed directly at the ground near Starweaver. But the blast never reached its target. Instead, it struck something invisible in the air and spread out like water hitting a window. "Shields," Ben whispered in amazement. More blasts came from the ships, all of them striking the same invisible barrier and dissipating harmlessly. The Vorthax hadn't moved, but somehow they were protected by technology that shouldn't exist. "Katie, are you getting readings on those shields?" Amanda asked. "Energy patterns unlike anything in our databases," Katie said, staring at her scanner. "This technology is thousands of years ahead of anything the galaxy has seen." Commander Vaughn's voice came through the speakers again, but now it sounded less confident. "What kind of defensive systems are those?" That's when Starweaver finally moved. She walked slowly toward the spot where the energy blasts had struck the barrier. Then she made a sound that Jake had never heard before, a deep, complex call that seemed to echo from everywhere at once. The forest around them began to glow. Trees that looked ordinary moments before revealed themselves to be something else entirely. Surfaces that appeared to be bark and leaves shimmered and became metal and crystal. The entire forest was artificial, a carefully hidden city that had been disguised as wilderness. "This isn't a habitat," Amanda breathed. "It's a settlement, an advanced settlement." More Vorthax emerged from the now revealed city, but these weren't like the ones they had met. These Vorthak wore equipment that gleamed with the same technology as the shields. They moved with purpose and intelligence that made it clear they were not primitive creatures. The cubs, Jake said suddenly, understanding hitting him like a physical blow. This whole time this was never about babysitting, it was a test. What kind of test? Ben asked. A test to see if humans could be trusted, Jake said. The Vorthak are an advanced civilization, but they pretend to be primitive animals. They let other species think they're just dangerous beasts. Why would they do that? Katie asked. To you. See how those species treat them, Amanda said, the pieces falling into place. Every other race that found them tried to capture or kill them. But humans tried to protect their children, Jake finished. Scout looked up at him and made a sound that Ben's translator identified as agreement. The little cub had understood every word. Above them, the hegemony ships were firing everything they had at the barrier, but nothing was getting through. Commander Vaughn's voice came through the speakers one more time, but now it was full of fear. Retreat. All ships. Immediate retreat. We are facing unknown technology. But Starweaver made another call, and suddenly the hegemony ships weren't moving anymore. They hung in space like toys, held motionless by the same technology that powered the shields. Tractor beams, Katie said in amazement. But the power required to hold that many ships. The Vorthak aren't just advanced, Amanda said. They're more advanced than anyone in the galaxy. They could have destroyed the hegemony fleet in seconds. So why didn't they? Ben asked. Jake looked down at the cubs in his arms, then up at Starweaver. The massive Vorthak was watching him with an expression that looked almost proud. Because, Jake said slowly, they wanted to see what we would do. When faced with overwhelming force, would humans abandon the cubs to save themselves, or would we stay and protect them? And? Amanda asked. We stayed, Jake said simply. Starweaver approached their group and gently touched Jake's forehead with her snout. This time the mental contact was stronger and clearer. Images filled Jake's mind. Vast cities among the stars. Peaceful worlds where different species lived together. Technology that could heal planets and bring life to dead worlds. And, in every image, humans worked alongside Vorthak as equals and partners. She's showing me the future, Jake said in wonder. A future where humans and Vorthak explore the galaxy together. You mean we passed? Katie asked. Scout climbed up Jake's chest and touched his face with one tiny paw. The cub made a sound that needed no translation. It was the sound of pure joy. We more than passed, Jake said, smiling as all three cubs began purring at once. We just became part of their family. 6 months later, Jake sat in his new office on Earth watching through the large window as a Vorthak transport ship landed in the field outside. Scout, Ember, and Titan pressed their faces against the glass beside him, their scales shimmering with excitement. They were much bigger now, about the size of large dogs, but they still acted like excited puppies whenever visitors arrived. Is that them? Amanda asked, walking into the office with a stack of reports. The Human Vorthak Cooperation Center had grown quickly, and there was always paperwork to handle. Should be the delegation from the Andromeda sector, Jake said. 3. More Vorthak families ready to start the trust trials with human partners. Scout made a happy chirping sound and bounded toward the door. The cubs had learned to open doors months ago, much to everyone's surprise. Jake followed them outside with Amanda close behind. Starweaver emerged from the transport first, followed by 5 other adult Vorthak. Each one carried a small bundle in their mouth. More cubs, Jake realized with a smile. The trust trials were spreading across human colonies throughout the galaxy. Welcome to Earth, Jake said, approaching Starweaver. The massive Vorthak had become something like a sister to him over the past months. She touched his forehead gently, with her snout, sharing images of her journey and the families she had brought with her. The new cubs were placed on the ground and immediately began exploring. Scout, Ember, and Titan rushed over to greet them, and soon all the young Vorthak were playing together like old friends. Dr. Harrison, came a voice from behind him. Jake turned to see Ben Murphy approaching with Katie Ross and 3 humans he didn't recognize. These are the volunteers for the new partnerships, Ben explained. Meet Dr. Lisa Chen, engineer Mark Taylor, and teacher Sarah Williams. Jake shook hands with each of them. They all looked nervous but excited, which was exactly the right attitude for working with Vorthak cubs. "Any advice?" asked Dr. Chen. "Don't think of them as animals or research subjects," Jake said. "Think of them as very smart children who happen to have scales and sharp teeth. They can sense your emotions, so be genuine. And remember, their parents are always watching." Sarah Williams knelt down as one of the new cubs approached her. The little Vorthak sniffed her hand curiously, then looked back at its mother for approval. The adult Vorthak made a soft rumbling sound, and the cub climbed into Sarah's lap. "It's so warm," Sarah said in wonder. "And so smart," added Mark Taylor, as another cub began investigating his engineering tools with obvious intelligence. Katie was taking readings with her scanner. "The psychic bond formation is happening faster than with the first trials. The Vorthak are getting better at identifying compatible humans. Or humans are getting better at opening their minds to the process," Amanda suggested. Jake watched as Dr. Chen was chosen by the third new cub. The little Vorthak had tested both men before walking directly to her and making a sound that clearly meant mine. It was amazing how quickly the bonds formed when both species were willing. "Jake," Amanda said, showing him her tablet. "We just got word from the colony on New Geneva. Their trial was successful too. That makes 15 human settlements, now partnered with Vorthak families, and 12 more requesting to join the program," Ben added. "The applications keep coming in." Scout wandered over and leaned against Jake's leg, purring contentedly. The young Vorthak was now tall enough to reach Jake's waist, and its scales had developed the same color-shifting ability as its mother's. "How's the language project coming along?" Jake asked Ben. "Incredible progress. The cubs are natural translators. They're teaching us Vorthak concepts that we never knew existed, and learning human ideas that fascinate their parents." "Like what?" "Humor. For one thing. Vorthak don't naturally understand jokes, but the cubs are picking it up from their human partners. Yesterday, Titan told Starweaver a knock-knock joke. She was completely confused, but laughed anyway because Titan was so happy." Jake chuckled. Titan had been practicing human humor for weeks with mixed results. The young Vorthak's idea of comedy was still developing. "There's something else," Amanda said, her tone becoming more serious. "We've been contacted by other species. The Zentaurians want to know if they can attempt their own trust trials. And Starweaver says no. According to her, only 3 species in galactic history have passed the Vorthak tests. Humans are the third." "Who were the other 2? Jake asked. "She won't say yet. That information comes later when we're ready for it." Scout looked up at Jake and made a questioning sound. The young Vorthak had learned to sense when conversations were important, even if it couldn't understand all the words yet. "It's okay, Scout," Jake said, scratching behind the creature's ears. "Just grown-up talk." But Scout wasn't satisfied with that answer. The young Vorthak walked over to its mother and made a series of complex sounds. Starweaver listened, then approached Jake. The mental contact was brief but clear. Images filled Jake's mind of vast ships traveling between galaxies, of species working together to build wonders beyond imagination, of threats from dark spaces that required unity to defeat. "What did she show you?" Amanda asked, seeing Jake's expression. "The real reason for the trials," Jake said slowly. "The Vorthak aren't just looking for friends. They're building an alliance. There's something coming from outside our galaxy. Something dangerous. They need partners they can trust completely." "What kind of something?" Katie asked. Before Jake could answer, Ember came running over with something clutched in its mouth. The young Vorthak dropped a small device at Jake's feet and made excited sounds. "What's that?" Ben asked. Jake picked up the device. It was made of the same crystal and metal as Vorthak technology, but smaller and simpler than anything he'd seen before. "A communicator," he realized. "Ember, where did you get this?" The young Vorthak pointed toward the transport ship with one claw, then made sounds that Ben's translator identified as, "for Jake." Starweaver approached and touched the device with her snout. Suddenly it began to glow with soft blue light. "Jake, Harrison of Earth," came a voice from the device, speaking perfect English. "This is Elder Council Member Voidsinger, calling from the Vorthak homeworld. We have watched your progress with great interest." Everyone gathered around as the voice continued. "The trials on Earth have exceeded our expectations. Humanity has shown not only the ability to protect our young, but to truly understand and accept them as family. This level of empathy and trust is rare in the galaxy." Jake looked down at Scout, Ember, and Titan, who were all listening intently to the voice of their elder. "Therefore, we formally invite humanity to join the Ancient Alliance. You will learn of the other member species in time, and together we will prepare for the challenges ahead. But know this, humans of Earth. You were chosen not for your strength or your technology, but for your capacity to love without seeking to possess." The device went quiet. Jake stared at it, then at the cubs who had become such an important part of his life. "So what happens now?" Amanda asked. Scout looked up at Jake and made a sound that needed no translation. It was the sound of home, of family, of belonging. "Now we learn," Jake said, smiling as all three cubs pressed close to him. "We learn what it means to be part of something bigger than ourselves." Starweaver made a deep, rumbling sound that Jake had learned meant pride and joy. As he looked around at the humans and Vorthak working together, playing together, learning from each other, he realized something important. The cubs hadn't chosen him as a babysitter. They had chosen him as the first step in bringing two species together as family. And that, Jake thought as Ember climbed onto his shoulders and Titan curled up at his feet, was the best job he'd ever had. In the distance, more ships appeared in the sky. Not just Vorthak transports, but vessels from other worlds, other colonies where humans and Vorthak were building new partnerships. The alliance was growing, one trust trial at a time, and it had all started with 3 baby Vorthak who needed someone to keep them safe.